what have we looked at so far and what is still outstanding? For both products, for the laptop computers and also for desktop computers, we have already considered and we've already calculated the impact that discontinuing desktop computers will have on sales and variable costs associated to both products. So we've performed all of the calculations for sales and variable costs for both products. We now just need to look at the impact on fixed costs. So we have labor, which is a fixed cost, and we also have fixed overheads. Now for labor, you're told that the desktop laborers earning 1 million rand will be used to produce laptop computers. The remaining desktop computer laborers will be retrenched at a cost of 1,260,000 rand. All right, so the labor cost of 1 million rand, this cost is not relevant because it's not avoidable. Regardless of whether they produce desktop computers or not, they are still going to pay these laborers 1 million rand. Either the laborers will be working on desktop computers and then they'll be paid 1 million rand, or if they discontinue the production of desktop computers, those laborers will be moved and they'll now manufacture laptop computers, but they will still be paid 1 million rand. So regardless of whether the division produces desktop computers or not, they will still incur the labor cost of 1 million rand. So that portion is not relevant because it's not avoidable. However, the balance, the remaining desktop computer laborers will be retrenched. So the balance of the labor cost is relevant because it's avoidable. If they continue producing desktop computers, they will obviously need to pay these laborers. However, if they discontinue producing desktop computers, these laborers will be retrenched and they will save the labor cost. So because it's avoidable, it is relevant. Then the retrenchment cost over here, you just need to be careful. That's not a recurring cost. That is a once-off cost. So we need to account for once-off costs separately in our calculation. So right at the end, when we get to the end of our calculation, we'll take this retrenchment cost into account. They will only pay this retrenchment cost once off, so it will only affect profits initially, and after that, then obviously this cost will already have been paid and it won't be paid again. So because it's a once-off cost, we will look at the retrenchment costs separately. All right. Now, we are going to be ignoring the labor cost associated to laptop computers because there's no change in that labor cost. Regardless of what happens, that labor cost is still going to be incurred. So there's nothing that we need to do for that labor cost. However, for the desktop computers, we said 1 million rand of this cost is not relevant because it's not avoidable, but the balance, the other 4,040,000, that is relevant because it's avoidable. If they discontinue the production of desktop computers, those laborers will be retrenched and that labor cost will obviously be saved. So let's take that into account in our calculation. So first we are going to look at the labor costs that are relevant, the costs that would be saved if they discontinue producing the desktop computers, the 4,040,000. All right, and this would be a saving if they discontinue the production of desktop computers. So you add this back as a saving. All right, then the 1 million rand, we said that's not relevant because regardless of whether they continue producing desktop computers or not, they're still going to pay those laborers 1 million rand. So the laborers that will be reassigned to laptop computers is not relevant. So just include that at 0 rand. All right, guys, so don't just leave the cost out if it's not relevant. From an exam technique perspective, you need to show the examiner that you know the cost is not relevant. So don't just leave it out, include it in your solution, but obviously at 0 rand. not at R1 million because the R1 million is not relevant. Please also just be careful from an exam technique perspective. Always read the required carefully. Often when it comes to decision making, you need to give reasons why the costs are not relevant. So if you go back to the required over here, we didn't have to give reasons in this example, so there's no reasons provided. We just say the cost is not relevant, and we show the examiner we know the cost is not relevant. But be careful, often you need to give reasons. So if in the required they tell you must give reasons for all costs that are not relevant, obviously you must include reasons because there will be marks awarded for including a reason. But that's not applicable in this question. All right, so that deals with labor. So the only cost that we haven't considered is fixed overheads. And we are specifically told that 2.8 million rand of fixed overheads that specifically relate to Division B will be eliminated if the production of desktop computers is discontinued. So let's have a look at the fixed overheads in more detail, because we also know that those fixed overheads include organizational overheads. And those are allocated costs or allocated head office costs. And allocated costs are also never relevant because they are not actual cash flows relating to Division B. They are head office or organizational overheads that have just been allocated down to Division B. So regardless of whether they produce the desktop computers or not, the organizational overhead will still be incurred. So in other words, because it's not avoidable, it's not relevant. All right, so here's our calculation for fixed overheads. It was calculation 3. We know that 30% of the fixed overhead relates to allocated head office costs. So we've already said that that portion is not relevant because it's not avoidable. Then the balance, the other 70%, specifically relates to Division B. Then we are told 2.8 million rand of the fixed overhead that specifically relates to Division B will be eliminated. So this overhead that specifically relates to Division B, the fixed overhead, part of this fixed overhead will be saved. So part of it is avoidable. If they discontinue producing desktop computers, they will save 2.8 million rand in fixed overheads that specifically relate to Division B. Then the balance is obviously not avoidable. So just calculate what the balance is. It's 6,860,000 rand. So the balance here that's not avoidable, because it's not avoidable, it's also not going to be relevant. Because regardless of whether they produce the desktop computers or not, they are still going to incur this cost over here. So that portion over there is not relevant. However, the portion that is avoidable, the portion that will be saved, that is going to be relevant. If they continue producing the desktop computers, they will incur this cost of 2.8 million rand. However, if they discontinue producing desktop computers, they will save 2.8 million rand. So that portion of the cost is relevant. But once again, from an exam technique perspective, make sure that you clearly show which costs are not relevant in your calculation. So first we have the allocated head office costs, which are not relevant. Then we have the portion of fixed overheads that are not avoidable. And if they are not avoidable, they are not relevant. And then lastly, we have the portion of fixed overheads that are avoidable, or in other words, the portion of fixed overheads that will be saved. And that's a saving of 2.8 million rand. All right, guys, so now we've considered everything. We've taken everything into account. We've looked at the impact on sales for both products. We've looked at the impact on variable costs for both products. We've looked at the impact on fixed costs. So we can now calculate the net saving or the net loss if they discontinue producing desktop computers. And you'll see here we have a saving of 3,080,400. And please note, guys, that is a long-term saving. Because initially, in the short term, they're going to have to pay retrenchment costs. And the retrenchment costs are 1.26 million rand. So initially, when they first discontinue producing the desktop computers, they will save 1,820,400 rand. And then annually, every year after that, they'll save 3,080,400, because obviously every year after that, they won't have the retrenchment costs. The retrenchment costs are just once off. All right. So because we've calculated a saving if they discontinue producing desktop computers, you can therefore conclude that the production of desktop computers should be discontinued. Then in part E, write a memorandum to the manager of Division B explaining the qualitative factors that should be considered before the production of desktop computers is discontinued. Then there's 1 mark available for communication skills, and that is awarded for layout and structure. All right, so the communication skill mark is obviously going to be awarded for setting out your answer in the format of a memorandum. So let's have a look at that first. Clearly indicate that this is a memorandum. Who is the memorandum to? In the required, you are told to write a memorandum to the manager of Division B. So it's to the manager of Division B. Who is it from? You are a CTA student. Please remember, guys, don't write your name over here. If you write your name, you will not be awarded the communication skill mark. Then write the date, and the subject is qualitative factors to be considered before the production of desktop computers is discontinued. Then please remember also to always have a conclusion. All right, so that deals with the communication skill mark. Then if you go back to the required, you are specifically asked for qualitative factors. So please note, guys, that means you can't discuss costs. We've already looked at the costs in part D of the required, where we performed our calculation. And from a cost perspective, we know that it's worthwhile for them to discontinue producing desktop computers because it will result in a saving. So we've already dealt with the costs. You are now just looking at qualitative factors. If you discuss anything to do with costs, you will not be awarded the mark. Now, first we know employees are going to be retrenched. And there's quite a few things that you can discuss around the retrenchment of employees. You need to consider the legal requirements when it comes to retrenchments, and also the negative social implications of retrenching employees. In addition to that, you need to consider the potential loss of scarce skills, because obviously those employees now no longer work for your company. You've lost those skills within the company. And in the future, if you now want to introduce a different product, you're then going to have to recruit people again and upskill them again. And then in addition to that, the retrenchment may cause a decline in the morale of remaining staff, which could have a negative impact on their future productivity. So those are all of the things that you can discuss associated to the retrenchment. Then in addition to that, you need to consider the impact on customers. Customers are currently buying desktop computers from Division B, customers that want desktop computers. So what impact will this have on the relationship with their customers, who depend on Division B for the supply of desktop computers. In addition to that, if they discontinue desktop computers, it could have a negative impact on the sale of laptop computers, because some computers might be coming to CompuTech. Sorry, I forgot the name of the company for a second. Some customers might be coming to CompuTech and Division B specifically because they want a range of laptop and desktop computers. So now if they can't get desktop computers, they might decide to rather use a different supplier that can give them both laptop and desktop computers. So you need to consider the fact that discontinuing desktop computers could have a negative impact on the sale of laptop computers. So what is the impact on sales volumes of laptop computers? Because discontinuing the production of desktop computers could potentially have a negative impact on the sale of laptop computers. You need to consider how competitors will react and the effect of the company image in the marketplace, and then any other valid point. So if you have any other valid points, and as long as you are not discussing costs, you can award yourself a maximum of 1 other mark. All right, guys, but this was very straightforward, very simple. You shouldn't have struggled with this part of the required. And that then brings us to the end of this question. If there's still anything that you're unsure of, please let me know. Thank you, guys.